My phone buzzed on the coffee table, a sharp, angry vibration against the wood. I didn't even have to look at it. I knew who it was. It was a Friday night just before 7, and the timing was as predictable as the sunset. For a single fleeting moment, I let myself imagine it was just a normal text. Maybe a friend asking about the game or a meme from a group chat. But I knew better. That specific buzz, the one that seemed to carry a weight all its own, could only be from my sister Ava. I picked up the phone. The screen glowed with her name, and underneath it the message I'd been dreading all week. "Hey, can you help me out? Landlord is on my case. Need the $300 for rent ASAP. $300. The number stared back at me cold and clinical. A few years ago, a message like this would have sent a jolt of panic through me. I would have dropped everything, checked my bank account, and been at an ATM within 10 minutes. Because that's what you do. You take care of your family, especially when it's the only family you have left. But now that message just filled me with a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. A sadness so heavy, it felt like it was sinking my ribs into my lungs. I knew for a fact the rent wasn't due for another 2 weeks. I knew because I paid my half directly to the landlord's portal on the 1st of every month like clockwork. And I knew because our landlord, a tired-looking guy named Mr. Henderson, was about as proactive as a hibernating bear. He wouldn't be on her case unless the rent was a month late, and he'd already sent 3 certified letters. So the $300 wasn't for rent. I knew what it was for. And the lie, so casual and so blatant, was what hurt the most. I leaned back on my couch, the worn fabric groaning in protest. My gaze drifted to a framed photo on the mantel. It was the last one we ever took as a complete family. Mom, Dad, me at 25, and Ava at 21. We were all smiling, squinting into the sun at a state park. It was taken just a few months before the accident, before a slippery road and a patch of black ice changed everything forever. 3 years. It felt like a lifetime, and no time at all. After the funeral, when the world was a blur of casseroles and sympathetic whispers, Ava and I had to make a choice. The apartment, the one we grew up in, was in our parents' names. We could either pack up 2 decades of memories and find separate, smaller places, or we could try to keep it, to hold on to the last piece of them we had left. For Ava, there was no question. She couldn't bear the thought of leaving. And for me then, 25, seeing my little sister so utterly broken, I couldn't say no. I was the big brother. It was my job to be the strong one, the responsible one. So I met with Mr. Henderson, explained the situation, and co-signed the new lease. Our names, Elias Carter and Ava Carter, right there on the dotted line. It felt like the right thing to do, a noble act. I was preserving our home, providing stability for my grieving sister. I had no idea that my signature on that document would become the chain that bound me to her storm. For the first year, things were okay. We were both just surviving. But then, about 2 years ago, something in Ava shifted. The grief that had been a constant quiet hum in our lives seemed to curdle into something sharper, something more desperate. She started needing money more often. First it was for a car repair, then a textbook she swore she needed for a class she was taking. Then it was to cover a shift she missed at work because she was sick. I paid. Every time. I was 26, my job was stable, and I didn't have many expenses. I saw it as my duty. I was helping my sister stay on her feet. I was being the provider our dad would have wanted me to be. I was so focused on playing the part of the family rock that I refused to see the cracks forming right beneath my feet. The truth came crashing down on me 6 months ago. It was an ordinary Tuesday. I was dropping off some mail that had been mistakenly sent to my new place. Ava wasn't home, but she'd told me where she kept the spare key. I let myself in, and the apartment hit me with a wave of stale air and neglect. Dirty dishes were piled in the sink, and laundry overflowed from a hamper in the hall. It was messy, but that wasn't what stopped me in my tracks. It was the smell, a faint acrid chemical scent I couldn't place. I called her name again just in case. No answer. I put the mail on the kitchen counter, and that's when I saw it. Tucked behind the fruit bowl, half hidden, was a small scorched piece of aluminum foil and a cut-up plastic straw. My blood ran cold. I'd seen enough TV shows, enough health class videos to know exactly what I was looking at. It was paraphernalia. My mind started racing, recontextualizing the last 2 years. The constant requests for cash, the illnesses, the jobs she couldn't keep. The weight loss I had tried to convince myself was just stress. It wasn't just grief. It was a full-blown substance abuse problem. I felt a surge of nausea. I backed out of the kitchen, went into her bedroom, and feeling like the worst kind of trespasser, I opened her nightstand drawer. Underneath a pile of old magazines, I found more. A small baggie with white residue, a glass pipe. My heart hammered against my ribs. The evidence was incontrovertible. For 2 years, I hadn't been paying for her rent or her bills. I had been funding her addiction. I had been handing her the shovel and telling her to dig. That was the day the cash flow stopped. That was 6 months ago. We had a horrible fight. I didn't tell her what I found. I couldn't bring myself to voice it to make it that real. I just told her I couldn't give her cash anymore. I said I would pay my half of the rent and the utilities directly, but the handouts had to end. She had exploded. She accused me of being controlling, of being cheap, of abandoning her when she needed me most. It was a brutal, ugly fight, and it ended with her screaming and me walking out, my hands shaking. Since then, our relationship has been a cold war punctuated by these desperate pleading texts for money. Each one was a test. Each one was a temptation to just give in to buy a few days of peace to pretend everything was okay. But I couldn't, not after what I saw. Staring at her text now, the need the $300 for rent. ASAP. I felt that old conflict churning inside me. Part of me, the tired, beaten down part, just wanted to send it, just to make the problem go away for a little while. But the other part of me, the part that still remembered my bright, laughing sister before our world fell apart, knew that sending that money wasn't an act of love. It was an act of surrender. It was me agreeing to be her co-conspirator. And then there was the lease. That damned lease. It was my legal tether. If she decided to stop paying her half out of spite, or if she got so lost in her addiction that she forgot I was on the hook for the whole amount. If she got evicted, my name got dragged through the mud right alongside hers. My credit would be destroyed. It was the perfect leverage, and she knew it. She could threaten to burn down the whole house knowing I was legally obligated to stand there and get burned with her. I couldn't give her cash, but I couldn't just ignore her either. Ignoring her felt like leaving her to drown. Giving her cash felt like holding her head underwater. There had to be another way, a third option. My eyes fell on the half-empty carton of milk in my fridge. An idea began to form. It was a small gesture, maybe a pathetic one, maybe even an insulting one. But it was honest. It was something. I stood up, grabbed my keys, and walked out of my apartment. I didn't drive towards the bank. I didn't head for an ATM. I drove to the grocery store down the street. The automatic doors hissed open, and I was hit with the sterile, fluorescent-lit calm of the supermarket. I grabbed a basket, my movements feeling slow and deliberate, like I was moving through water. I bypassed the snacks, the frozen dinners, the beer aisle. I walked with a purpose. First, the pasta aisle. I picked up a box of spaghetti and a jar of marinara sauce. Simple. Filling. Something our mom used to make on weeknights. Then I went to the soup aisle. I grabbed 2 cans of chicken noodle and 2 cans of tomato. Comfort food. The kind of thing you eat when you're sick and need something warm. In the next aisle, I found a loaf of whole wheat bread and a jar of peanut butter. The most basic, fundamental sustenance I could think of. It was food that said, I want you to live. I want you to be nourished. Finally, I walked to the refrigerated section at the back of the store. I opened the heavy glass door and pulled out a single gallon of milk. I looked at the items in my basket. 1 standard paper grocery bag's worth of non-perishable essentials and a gallon of milk. I went to the self-checkout. The total came to $45. $45 of actual, tangible help, not $300 of poison. As the machine spit out my receipt, I felt a strange sense of clarity. I was terrified. I knew this wouldn't be received well. I knew Ava wasn't going to thank me. I was walking into a Category 5 hurricane, and my only shield was a paper bag full of groceries. But for the first time in 6 months, I felt like I was doing the right thing. Not the easy thing, not the thing that would buy me temporary peace. The right thing. I put the bag and the milk on the passenger seat of my car. I buckled them in with the seatbelt, a gesture that was half joke, half prayer. Then I started the engine and began the 10-minute drive to the apartment that used to be our home, bracing myself for the storm I was about to unleash. The 10-minute drive felt like 10 hours. Every red light was a personal judgment holding me in place, giving my anxiety more time to metastasize. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel. The grocery bag sat on the passenger seat, buckled in like a child, its paper crinkling with every turn. The gallon of milk, cold and solid, seemed to radiate a kind of moral certainty that I absolutely did not feel. I was rehearsing lines in my head, a script for a play I didn't want to be in. Ava, we need to talk. No too cliché. Ava, I can't give you cash anymore. Too confrontational. Ava, I brought you some food because I'm worried about you. Too soft. It would bounce right off her. In the end, I decided there was nothing I could say that would make this go smoothly. The truth was a grenade, and there was no gentle way to roll it into a room. You just had to pull the pin and brace for the blast. I pulled up to the curb in front of the apartment building. Our apartment building. For a second, I just sat there, engine idling, staring up at the third-floor window. The lights were on. I could picture the layout of the rooms perfectly. The worn spot on the carpet just inside the door where our dad used to kick off his work boots. The faint water stain on the ceiling of the living room that looked, if you squinted, like a map of Australia. The tiny kitchen where our mom taught us both how to make scrambled eggs, letting us stand on a stool so we could reach the stove. It was a museum of a life that didn't exist anymore, and Ava was living in it, or maybe haunting it. Finally, I cut the engine. The silence that rushed in was deafening. I unbuckled the seatbelt from the grocery bag, grabbed it and the milk, and got out of the car. The evening air was cool, the sky a deep, bruised purple. It was Friday, October 11th, around 7 o'clock, a normal time on a normal day for everyone else in the world. For me, it felt like I was walking toward my own execution. The lobby smelled the same as it always had, a faint mix of stale cigarette smoke and that lemon-scented cleaner the superintendent used. I didn't take the elevator. I took the stairs, my footsteps echoing on the concrete. It was a way to delay the inevitable for another 30 seconds. With each step, the weight of the groceries seemed to increase. This $45 purchase felt heavier than any $300 in cash ever had. Cash was anonymous. It was easy. This was a statement. This was a choice. I reached the third floor, my heart hammering against my ribs. I walked down the familiar beige-colored hallway to apartment 3B, our door. I stood in front of it for a long moment, taking a deep breath. I could hear the faint sound of a TV from inside. I shifted the milk jug to my other hand, wiped my sweaty palm on my jeans, and knocked. 3 sharp raps, our old family signal. The TV sound cut off abruptly. I heard shuffling, the click of a lock being undone. The door creaked open, just a few inches at first, held by the security chain. One of Ava's eyes peered through the gap. It was bloodshot and wary. "Elias." Her voice was raspy thin. "Did you get it?" She didn't say hello. She didn't ask how I was, just, "Did you get it?" My name was just the preface to the question. "Can I come in, Ava?" I asked, my own voice sounding steadier than I felt. She hesitated, her eyes scanning me, then dropping to the bag and the milk in my hands. A flicker of confusion crossed her face. She fumbled with the chain, her hands shaking slightly, and then the door swung open. The sight of her hit me like a physical blow. I had been preparing myself, but it was still a shock. At 24, she looked a decade older. Her skin was pale and waxy, stretched tight over her cheekbones. There were dark, hollowed-out circles under her eyes that looked like bruises. Her hair, which she used to take such pride in, was greasy and pulled back in a messy knot. She was wearing an oversized stained sweatshirt and pajama pants, and the air around her was charged with a frantic, agitated energy. She was vibrating with a need so powerful, it was practically a third person in the doorway with us. This was withdrawal. This was the monster my cash had been feeding. "What's that?" she asked, nodding towards the groceries, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. She still hadn't looked at my face. Her gaze was locked on my hands, as if expecting an envelope of cash to materialize from behind the milk. "I brought you some things," I said, stepping past her into the apartment. The smell hit me, then stale air, unwashed clothes, and something else, something vaguely chemical and sour. The place was a mess. Old takeout containers were stacked on the end table. Clothes were strewn over the furniture, and a layer of dust coated every surface. This wasn't the home I remembered. It was a shell, a den. I walked straight to the kitchen. It was the heart of our old home, and now it felt like the coldest room in the house. I placed the gallon of milk on the counter. It landed with a solid, definitive thud. Then I set the paper bag down beside it. The sounds were loud in the tense silence. Ava followed me, her movements jerky and impatient. She stood a few feet away, wrapping her arms around herself, her eyes darting from me to the bag. "Okay," she said, her voice tight. "So where is it, the rent money?" I didn't answer right away. I reached into the bag and took out the loaf of bread, placing it on the counter next to the milk, then the jar of peanut butter. Her eyes followed my hands, her brow furrowed in a deep, confused line. She didn't understand what was happening. Her brain was wired for a simple transaction she asks I provide. This wasn't part of the code. I pulled out the cans of soup, lining them up in a neat little row. Chicken noodle, tomato, tomato. Each can made a soft clink as it touched the Formica countertop. Finally, I took out the box of spaghetti and the jar of sauce. I arranged everything carefully, a small fortress of nourishment on her cluttered counter. Then I looked at her. I really looked at her, meeting her gaze for the first time. "This is it," I said quietly. She stared at the display of food, at the gallon of milk, the bread, the soup. Her mind was working, trying to process the information. I could see the exact moment the confusion cleared like storm clouds, parting to reveal pure, unadulterated lightning. Her face, which had been a mask of anxious confusion, twisted into something ugly. Her jaw clenched, her pale skin flushed with a sudden blotchy red. The need in her eyes was instantly replaced by a furious, burning betrayal. Her voice, when it came, was low and trembling with rage. "What is this?" I stood my ground. "It's food, Ava." "I see that it's food, you idiot," she hissed, taking a step closer. Her whole body was coiled like a spring. "I asked you for $300, for the rent. I didn't ask you to go shopping for me. What is this?" "I'm not giving you cash anymore," I said, keeping my voice as level as I could. That was the spark. Her face contorted. "Cash. You think this is about cash?" She let out a laugh, but it was a horrifying sound, sharp and brittle, with no humor in it at all. It was the sound of something breaking. "I need to pay the landlord, Elias. Or do you not care if we get thrown out on the street? Do you want that on your conscience?" "The rent's not due for another 2 weeks," I stated calmly, "and I'll pay my half directly, just like I always do." Her eyes blazed. She was looking at the groceries like they were poison, like I had brought a pile of venomous snakes into her kitchen and laid them on her counter. To her, I suppose I had. I hadn't brought her what she needed. I had brought her what I thought she needed, and that was an unforgivable act of judgment. She pointed a shaking finger at the food. "This is a joke. This is you. What, trying to teach me a lesson? Playing dad. You think you can show up here with $45 worth of pathetic cheap food and act like you're some kind of saint?" Her voice was rising, with every word becoming shrill, echoing off the dirty tiles of the kitchen. "I asked for rent money," she screamed, her voice cracking. "Not a handout." The word hung in the air between us, sharp and ugly. Handout. She spat it like a curse. For a second, a flicker of the old Ava, the sarcastic, fiery sister I grew up with, flashed in her eyes. But it was gone in an instant, consumed by the raw, desperate need that was now her entire personality. Her eyes darted from my face to the groceries on the counter and then back again. I saw the calculation. The $45 worth of food versus the $300 she'd demanded. In her world, this wasn't just a bad deal. It was a profound insult. It was a judgment. And she was right. It was. She took a step back, a bitter, mocking smile twisting her lips. "Wow," she breathed, shaking her head slowly. "Just, wow. You really think you're doing something noble here, don't you? Big brother Elias swooping in to save his pathetic little sister from herself." Her voice dripped with venom. "You're not saving me. You're controlling me. You get off on it, don't you? Holding the purse strings, deciding what I'm allowed to have, what I'm allowed to eat. That's not what this is," I said, my own voice dangerously low. "This is me not giving you money that I know you're not going to use for rent." That was a mistake. The thin veil of sarcasm she was wearing ripped away, her face contorted with pure rage. With a guttural scream that seemed to tear out of her throat, she lunged forward. Not at me, but at the counter. She grabbed the paper grocery bag, the one I had packed so carefully, and with all her strength, she hurled it against the opposite wall. The bag exploded. The box of spaghetti burst open, sending a shower of dry pasta across the floor. The jar of peanut butter hit the wall with a sickening thud and fell, thankfully not breaking. But the jar of pasta sauce wasn't so lucky. It shattered on impact, spraying a bloody arc of red across the cheap yellowing wallpaper. It looked like a crime scene. Cans of soup rolled across the linoleum like metal grenades. I flinched, but I didn't move. I just stood there watching the destruction, watching her. She was breathing heavily, her chest heaving. Her hands clenched into white-knuckled fists at her sides. Her eyes were wild. "There!" she shrieked, pointing at the mess. "Is that what you wanted, huh? Do you feel like a big man now? You come into my home, our parents' home, and you throw this poverty food in my face and expect me to what? Thank you." She took a ragged breath, and then she did the one thing I knew she would. The one thing she always did when she wanted to truly hurt me. She weaponized our ghosts. Mom and Dad. She choked out, her voice breaking with a sick, theatrical sob. "They would be so ashamed of you. They would be disgusted. They always told you to look out for me, to take care of me. And this is how you do it, by starving me, by treating me like a child. They would hate what you've become." A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. Of all the things she could have said, that was the one designed to break me. For 3 years since the accident, my entire life had been shaped by a silent promise I made to my parents, and she was twisting it using their memory as a knife to stab me with. But something was different this time. For the past 6 months since I found out the truth, a new kind of resolve had been hardening inside me. The grief was still there, but it was now plated with a cold, protective armor. "Don't," I said, my voice flat and empty of emotion. "You don't get to use them. Not anymore." I looked from her to the mess on the floor and back to her. "I'm going to say this one more time, Ava. So listen. The rent is due in 2 weeks. I will go to the landlord's office and I will pay my half. Directly. I will pay the electric bill. Directly. I will pay the water bill directly. If you need food, you call me and I will bring you food. But I am never ever giving you $1 more of cash. That is over." I expected her to scream again, to throw something else, but instead a slow, cunning smile spread across her face. It was the scariest expression I had seen yet. It was the look of someone who had just found their opponent's final weakness. "Okay," she said, her voice suddenly calm, almost sweet. "Okay, Elias, you want to play it that way? Fine, I just won't pay my half. At all." I stared at her, not understanding. She laughed, a genuine, chilling laugh this time. "You get it, I'll just stop paying. The eviction notices will come. They'll go on my record, and they'll go on yours. Remember, big brother, you co-signed. You're just as liable as I am. Your credit score, that perfect little number you're so proud of, it'll be destroyed. You won't be able to get a car loan. You won't be able to rent a new apartment. You'll be ruined. Right along with me. So how about it? Is your little moral high ground worth destroying your entire future over? Or are you going to go to the ATM and get me my $300? She stood there smug and triumphant. She had me. She had found the one piece of leverage she had left and was pressing on it with all her might. My legal and financial future held hostage. And in that moment, watching her gloat, something inside me finally snapped. All the pain, the fear, the frustration of the last 2 years, it all came boiling to the surface. The boundary I had set for myself, the one thing I had promised I wouldn't do, I was about to cross it. "No," I said. Her smile faltered. "No, what do you mean, no?" "I mean, no," I repeated, taking a step toward her. The kitchen suddenly felt tiny, the air thick and electric. "You want to know why I'm not giving you cash, Ava? You want to know the real reason. It's not because I'm trying to control you. It's not because I'm trying to be Dad." I stopped right in front of her, forcing her to look at me. My voice dropped to a raw, shaking whisper. "It's because I know about the drugs, Ava. I've known for 6 months. I found the burnt foil in your bathroom trash. I found the baggies under your mattress when I was looking for the spare key. I know." The color drained from her face. Every ounce of her smug confidence, her righteous anger, it all vanished. She looked like a ghost. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She just stared at me, her eyes wide with shock and terror. She was finally truly exposed. But I wasn't done. I had to make her understand the whole truth. Not just the facts, but the feeling behind them. The real reason I was standing in a ruined kitchen fighting with the only family I had left. "You want to talk about Mom and Dad?" I said, and now my own voice was breaking the armor, cracking wide open. "You want to talk about what they would think I think about it every single day. I think about that phone call. I think about the police officer on the other end of the line. I think about how 1 minute they were here and the next they were just gone. An accident. Something no one could control." Tears were streaming down my face, now hot and unstoppable. "I already lost them, Ava. I lost them in a car wreck I couldn't stop. I am not going to stand by and pay to lose my sister to an overdose. I am not going to finance your accident. I will let my credit burn. I will let this apartment go. I will lose everything before I give you the money that you used to end yourself. I will not help you die." The truth, raw and brutal, hung in the air between us. It was the ugliest, most honest thing I had ever said, and it shattered her. Her face, which had been frozen in shock, just crumpled. It was like watching a building implode. Her body seemed to fold in on itself. A sound escaped her lips, a deep, wounded animal cry of pure anguish. Her knees gave out, and she collapsed onto the floor right into the mess of scattered pasta and spilled sauce. She didn't try to catch herself. She just fell landing in a heap amidst the wreckage she had made. And she began to sob. Not the fake manipulative sobs from before, but deep, gut-wrenching wails of absolute despair. She curled into a ball on the dirty linoleum, her shoulders shaking violently, her hands covering her face as if she could hide from the words I had said. The rage was gone. The fight was gone. All the energy that had been crackling in the room just vanished, sucked into the black hole of her grief. All that was left was the quiet, rhythmic sound of her weeping, the sticky mess on the floor, and the two of us broken. I stood there for a long moment, my own tears drying on my cheeks, my body trembling with the adrenaline dump. I looked down at my little sister, my 24-year-old sister, who looked like a lost child weeping on the kitchen floor, and I felt every bit of my anger dissolve, replaced by an ache so profound it felt like a physical weight in my chest. Slowly, I walked over to the sink and grabbed the roll of paper towels. I knelt down not next to her, but near the biggest puddle of red sauce. I tore off a sheet and began to quietly clean up the mess. I started picking up the pieces of the broken glass jar carefully so I wouldn't cut myself. I didn't say a word. I just cleaned. It was the only thing I could think to do. A small, simple act of care in the middle of an impossible disaster. I worked in silence for a few minutes, the only sounds her ragged breaths and the scrape of paper towels on the floor. Her sobs slowly subsided into hitched, shaky gasps. Then a tiny voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it cut through the silence. It was hoarse and broken, muffled by her hands. "I need help." I stopped cleaning. I let the paper towel drop from my hand. I looked over at her, still curled up on the floor. She hadn't moved, but she had said the 3 words I had been waiting 6 months to hear. The 3 words I was starting to believe would never come. The victory wasn't in winning the argument. It wasn't about the $300. It was that broken whisper from the floor. I moved from the spill and knelt beside her. I didn't try to make her get up. I just sat there on the floor with her among the scattered, useless groceries. "I know," I said softly. She finally lowered her hands from her face. Her eyes were red and swollen, her face streaked with tears and dirt. She looked exhausted, defeated. "I'll help you," I said, my voice steady now. "Not with money, with real help. We can start looking tomorrow. We'll find a program, a doctor, whatever it takes. I'll take you there. I'll visit. I'll be there when you get out. I'll be there for all of it, I promise." She stared at me, her gaze searching my face, looking for the anger, the judgment. But there was none left. There was only us, the Carter siblings, the only 2 left. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. A wave of relief so powerful it almost made me dizzy washed over me. I reached out and put my arm around her, shaking shoulders, pulling her toward me. She didn't resist. She sagged against me, burying her face in my shoulder, and her body was racked with one last quiet sob. I just held her, there on the floor of our parents' old kitchen, surrounded by the wreckage of our fight. The immediate crisis over the money was over, replaced by the terrifying, fragile, and hopeful first step on a much, much longer road. But for the first time in years, it felt like a road we might actually walk together.